So this workshop, the way it got done in the end, is really two different subjects. So one is worship committees involving lay people in worship, best practices for worship, but mostly kind of aimed at lay people on worship teams, worship committees, program teams.
Good, good.
So that's part of it. And then the second part, which is really completely different, or the second topic they put in, which was really completely different, they wanted me to talk about is multi-site congregations and having branches. So why don't we spend some time on, we'll start with the multi-site and just spend a little bit of time on that, and then we will move into lay worship teams. And the one thing about the multi-site is that the worship services are produced locally, so that you've got lay worship. We have 4 lay worship teams, one in Albuquerque and one in each of our branches. And the ones in the branches do very different work because they have such a different kind of situation, because they're producing worship for more like this size than that size, which maybe not like what you are. So go through this with you. And let's see if I can figure out which button to push. Okay, so Albuquerque is the biggest city in the state. It's a city of about 1 million people in a state of about 2 million people. So
real beef jerky.
Right. So we're right there, kind of in the middle, and that's a picture of our old sanctuary and our new one, now connected together. Picture of our city just to kind of get you oriented. The state is a state of big landscapes, many cows, the very large array. This very large array, did you see the movie Contact? You know, it's pointed out to the stars, looking for somebody. Are you out there? These things are situated on a grid that's bigger than the Washington Beltway. So that, it just gives you a sense of the immense scale out there. Lots of sky, lots and lots of sky. Not very many people, and the ones that are there are clustered mostly in pretty small towns. Small towns, way too small for Unitarian Universalist congregation to thrive. The very unusual town of fewer than 100,000 people, which is a city in planner terms. 100,000 is a city. Anything smaller than 100,000 people, very, very unlikely that the Unitarian Universalist congregation will thrive. Albuquerque, five places with more than 100,000 people in them. The average town in New Mexico is more like 20. So can't do it. So that's the reason that we decided to start this. We're in our 7th year. So what we're going to cover briefly here is what is multi-site and multi-venue, and what is this new language, and why one might want to do it, and how to do it, at least one way of how. There are several. And also how to be, not only how to do a multi-site and establish branches, but how to think about being a multi-site church, which we are still living into. So let's talk about multi-venue first. Multi-venue is several different services on one site. Now, lots of congregations have 2 services, 9 and 11 or something like that, but they're basically the same service, repeated, so that more people can come in a small space. Multi-venue is a little bit different. Multi-venue makes this kind of postmodern, different strokes for different folks thought. And in a multi-venue church, your 9 o'clock service would be a contemporary service with band, and your 11 o'clock service a traditional service, or your 7 o'clock at night service a service aimed at teenagers and their friends that's all rocky and band-like. For a while, we had 3 different kinds of services. 9:30 and 11 were repeats, the more usual kind, but we also had a contemporary service, which was a completely different service devoted same sermon, but it was all contemporary music like we did this morning. And we also had a little group called Common Ground, which were formed in part so that we could test our video technology before we tried to export it to towns 300 miles away. But it ended up being, it lasted longer than the test period because at the same time we ended sharing of joys and concerns by letting people light candles and stand up with their joys and concerns. We said, we are too big for this. And the people who just couldn't stand letting go of that, they became the Common Ground congregation. So they did their joys and concerns. So that worked pretty well for us for a while. Thank you. There's something I'm allergic to in this state. Now we just have the 9:30 and 11 services, and we have our 3 branch services, which are not on our grounds. But these are all on one site. So when I first heard about this idea, I went to an evangelical church in the suburbs of San Diego, where I have to say, I kind of announced to their greeter who I was. I was a Unitarian Universalist, and I was there because I wanted to understand how they did their multi-site. And I could not have been more better treated. I could not have been made more welcome. They deployed a staff person to show me around, to kind of show me the back scenes, to tell me how this was working for them. And that staff person was a seminary trained person. He knew he was talking to a major heretic. Couldn't have been more helpful. So, that was a good experience. But what they met on what looked like a business park / industrial development. It was not built as a church. And they had one big room in which they had their main service and where the pastor preached. And the 6 o'clock in the evening, Saturday evening service was taped. And that was used. He preached again on Sunday morning again twice. But the tape was used for all the different venues. So this was basically a Baptist church. And I went to the folky service, the Where Have All the Flowers Gone service, and there was a guitarist, and we sang kind of folk style songs, and when it came time for the sermon, they put up the video of their preacher preaching the night before. Right across the way in another building was the traditional service with communion. And for those people, which is not common in Baptist churches to have communion every week, but they did it here, and they had one of the elders serve communion instead of all that singing, they served communion after the sermon. And there was another venue that was the old-timey hymns, piano player playing, What a Friend I Have in Jesus, and that was mostly older people. The rest of the congregation very mixed. You could tell the grandmas and grandpas were going to that service. It fed them and met their needs. So you can do a lot of style change and meet a lot of needs with the same sermon being written every week. So that's multi-venue. I don't know of any of our congregations that are really capitalizing on the multi-venue technology. Multi-site, though, there's 5 or 6 groups now doing multi-site. And multi-site is several services on different properties. This particular church in San Diego, they were also a multi-site church because they had grown so fast. They had inhabited 3 junior high schools, and in which they had their small congregations of about 200 people. And same thing, gather on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, and when it came time, and there was a campus pastor who was the pastor to this 200-member group, basically. If they got in, they found themselves in jail, he's the one who'd come to visit, or in the hospital, or whatever. And he ran a regular old Baptist service, except when it came time for the preaching, they turned on the video. They introduced me to the term sneaker net. There's the internet, but, the magic of the internet. Sneaker net is when you actually take a DVD and somebody puts on their sneakers and walks it over to the, or drives it to the next to those venues. They used the sneaker net for their venues. So that's the difference, multi-site and multi-venue worship. So then the question comes, why are we doing this? Well, one good reason to do it is crowding, and that's why we did it. We were completely full Sunday after Sunday, and we couldn't expand, and I didn't want to do 3 services. And we also at the same time noticed that we had a fair number of people coming from far away. So we had people who would come into Albuquerque from Socorro, 70 miles away. They were members of the church, and they didn't do this every week because it's so far. They would drive in, and they would go to church. They would get a restaurant, have lunch in an Albuquerque restaurant, and go to some of the shops that aren't available in small town Socorro, which has a Walmart. And we had 4 or 5 groups of those people, 3 or 4 each. And so that starts to be enough people that could really alleviate the crowding. So crowding is one. Another thing that I've come across even more often are congregations that are crowded. And actually, to some extent, we had this true also. We're right backed up against a mountain chain. Through the pass and across the mountain are the East Mountain communities. There are a lot of UUs in those East Mountain communities, and it's only 30 minutes away. So lots of people commute here 30 minutes to get to this church. That's not a big deal. But 2 things. Number one, they commuted in every darn day of the work week, and they didn't want to do it again on Sundays. And secondly, in the winter, the other side of the mountain gets a lot of snow. So they often didn't come for several months at a time in the winter. And I've talked to 3 or 4 congregations which have a very distinct site that's really close enough for commuting, except when. So that's another thing. So crowding's one, outreach is another. This town of Socorro had 5 families, and we were never going to get more, we didn't think, to drive all the way up. How do you get people really excited about driving all the way up to Al? They were all people who had been UUs before they moved to Socorro, and so they joined First Unitarian because that was the only thing to join, and that's the best they felt like they could do. But in a town of 10,000 people, we knew there weren't that many more. And certainly not that many more if the price of joining our church was to drive 70 miles, 140 miles every Sunday. So there's an outreach there that was possible. Another is ecology. Getting a whole bunch of people driving 140 miles to your church is not cool. Need I say more? And finally is options. And that is, some people like it big, some people like it small, some people like morning, some people like afternoon, some people like to drive, some people don't. The multi-site gives you options. And although we have not been quite as ambitious about this, because we decided we just had to build a new sanctuary, which we did, and thank God that's over. And now we can turn back to other things. So multi-site is the very in thing for everybody else. It is what the evangelicals have learned to do and are doing. It's their new norm. Among other things, they like the 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 member churches that have been the mega churches. However, more and more municipalities and neighborhoods are saying no way to that idea. You just cannot go buy 100 acres of land and put a 20,000 member church on it anymore. You could 20 years ago, but it's turned out to be too disruptive to neighbors and too disruptive to municipalities, to traffic patterns, all that kind of stuff. And so they are finding that they're being zoned out of places they want to be. They have discovered, more like what we have discovered, which is there are opportunities in rural America for outreach that they hadn't been, they're thinking, okay, well, we're never going to have a nice 20,000 member megachurch in Socorro, New Mexico, so I guess we have to leave it up to the Baptists that are there to be the Baptist presence there. And then somebody thought, no, wait a minute. Those churches are dying, which they are. They're only elderly people, which is true of most churches in America. They're not really doing a good job of capturing the imagination of young people, but we can, so maybe we should be there. It'll never be 20,000 members, but gosh, if it's 200, that's great. And they've invented a whole new job for ministers called the campus pastor. And that has allowed them to use the talents of the person who is a wonderful pastor, caring, loving, gentle, kind, a good organizer, able to visit, able to teach, able to do everything, but is not a good preacher. Because you don't have to preach. Or maybe you preach a few times a year and can really focus in on it. But the campus pastor is not a preaching job. It's a job for somebody who cares and organizes people. And there have always been people in everybody's ministry, including ours, whose talents would be better used as a campus pastor than as a sole practitioner in a tiny little church. So, this is something that you use with our independent streak, have a really hard time understanding, and that is a multi-site church is a branch, another branch, a mother church, another branch, all one church. The people who belong to the branches sign the membership book of First Unitarian. We take it to each branch several times a year. Yes, they're asked to pledge. Yes, they do pledge. They pledge at about the same rate as the members of the Albuquerque congregation. And they send their money, they put their money in the Albuquerque congregation bank account and all those things. It is one congregation. So it's the way to think about it is maybe in your congregation you have a program that has a line item like the religious education program or the potluck. They're all members of your church and they all pledge to the church, and presumably more or less some of what they pledge goes to that line item of the group that they most focus on. But it's all one church. So this is 3 different geographies, but all one church. So let's stop a minute and talk about the video, because the video is the crucial technology of this. And there's 2 kinds of video worship. What we did this morning, the words up on the screen, is actually not video-assisted worship, it's projection-assisted worship. So there's a projector in the worship hall, and on it, their order of service, the lyrics to the songs, oftentimes the announcements, oftentimes little videos of kids with their I was saved story or whatever, or the group come back on a mission trip talking about them, maybe a video. There's a lot of video clip and other kinds of media now available for worship leaders. Much more elaborate than anything we tried to do this morning. But the sermon is live. The preacher is right there. Video-assisted worship is something, it's almost the reverse of this. Most of the worship service is locally produced, but the sermon is on a video. Sometimes other elements are projected too. Sometimes they sing from words that are projected also. But the key issue is that there's a worship leader, like there would be in any congregation, that is telling people what to do, when to sing, that is doing a meditation, reading a reading, conducting the sharing part of the service, giving the benediction, lighting the chalice, all that stuff. None of that stuff's on the video. That's all done right here amongst us. Everything, really, usually, except the sermon. So the folks in Carlsbad, New Mexico, which is 300 miles from us. That is to say, it's further than from here to Boston. It's a big state. 3rd biggest state in the Union. And nothing much between us except cows, too. Cows and mountains. So the group in Carlsbad, they worship together in the afternoon at a Presbyterian church. All 3 of our branches rent space for very modest prices from other congregations. None of them had any trouble finding congregations to host them in small towns, and the congregations that we found to host them were very glad to have even the modest rent we pay week after week. It helps their budget. And we also often put in screens and other things that they couldn't afford, which they were glad to have and were glad to have them use. So they gather in the little chapel and they set up their stuff and they set out their chalice and they light their chalice and they do their announcements. I'm sure it's very similar probably, Judy, to the kinds of things that lay worship leaders do in your congregation. They lead a time of sharing and some meditation. They share the reading, which they've gotten from whoever's preaching has sent them in advance. And when it times to come from the sermon, they turn on the video and they project the sermon, which we've recorded at our 9:30 service and converted to a YouTube file and loaded it up to the web. And all they do is download it, write it to a DVD, and bring it to church with them. And 5 hours later, and in 7 years, we have only once had so many things go bad that in that 5 hours we could not manage to get that to them, and they had to read the script, which they also get just in case. And then they have a discussion, which we never do in the big congregation. But one of the other different strokes for different folks part of this is in the smaller groups, you can have a real discussion for 10 minutes. And yeah, well, we don't let them call it a talk back. It's a little too in your face. But they can talk about and talk around and discuss what they've just heard, and they cherish that very much. And then they get their coffee and have their time. So that's kind of how that works. So we in Albuquerque use projection-assisted worship. And now that we have a better way to do that in our new building, we are also a few times a year, the minister is going to be preaching in the branches and videoed from there.
Oh, wow.
And then the next week it'll be used in Albuquerque. So, what the people who are getting the video see is a headshot, the talking head. And we were very fortunate when we first started this. As a matter of fact, probably the reason we were able to pioneer in doing it this way is we had a video professional in the congregation who stopped us from being too ambitious too fast. He said, look, if you use one camera and can devote yourself to a headshot, that's simple to manage. You can teach any volunteer who cares enough to pay attention to do that and do it well. But 2 cameras so that you can pull out and go in and capture the side and the children's play and all that kind of stuff. That takes 2 cameras, and 2 cameras is 10 times as complicated as 1 camera because it requires trained operators and it requires editing software and it requires editing to get these pictures to go together. Now we are now doing this, but it took 4 years to get that to the place where we really can do it well. So we highly recommend the talking head. And when we said, oh gosh, just a talking head, that's going to be really alienating. It's going to be hard to pay attention to a video. He said, oh no. He said, there's the 110% rule. We said, oh yeah? What's the 110% rule? He said, the 110% rule is that if the face you see on the screen is bigger than 110% of what your brain expects to see at that distance, it's captivating because it's so big. And you won't have any trouble paying attention. And we have never had any trouble with people saying, oh gosh, this is alienating, I don't like this. But they're not watching it on a little home TV. Well, home TVs aren't little anymore.
Excuse me.
Are you going on? Okay. Yeah, the big head, right. So, and you probably all have been in situations where you're in a great big room, and so and the speaker's a little pinpoint down there, and so they put up a big screen. And even if you're close enough that you can actually see the person speaking and would have been pretty happy with it, your eyes keep going to that screen. So that's the 100% use. You have to have either a projector Or now, big screen TVs are getting so much cheaper that we've actually installed big screen TVs for 2 of our branches because it's easier and cheaper to use. The biggest issue has been the amount of light in the room, because especially for faces, a room that's any brighter than this one, you're really not going to see faces very well. You can see text, and the text colors come out okay, but if we started showing you pictures of people, even in a room with this much light, it wouldn't look quite real, so you'd lose interest. We discovered that the better projectors can handle more ambient light. The projector costs have come down so much in 7 years that it probably doesn't make that much difference anymore, but we really had to balance what we could afford with what would make the best. And the quality of the screen matters also. Didn't know that. Quality of the screen matters a lot. It's, in some ways, if you've got extra money, it's better to spend it on the screen. And quiet projectors we found were important too. We spent, especially our Edgewood branch, it took them 3 tries to find the right place to worship. We wanted them to find some kind of a meeting place with some kind of beauty. And as I said, all 3 of our groups, one meets in an Episcopal church, one in a Unity church, and one now in a Presbyterian church. So they found that 2 meet in small sanctuaries and 1 meets in a really nice little social hall. We trained religious leaders, worship leaders, and in the training we try to kind of pump up their sense of themselves as religious leaders. They're not just putting on a program. They are holding a group in worship. We talk to them about comfort and challenge, some of the same kinds of things that we talked about today. And we commission them to do that back at home for their congregations and tell them how important it is that they think of themselves as real spiritual leaders in their group.
You know different resources? Do I think that's
No, I don't think so. We
it.
had to make it up as we went along.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we really did. Another one, pick music that people can sing. It's been one of the ways in which we've had the hardest time getting them to back down from trying to sing out of the hymnal. The hymnal is full of songs that are only singable by groups of 50 or more.
Yeah.
And if you don't have 50, it's really hard. I know the words are beautiful and I know we love the tunes, but if you have a very fine pianist and a piano that's kept in tune, and people really like to sing and you're willing to teach those old hymns, then you can probably do it with 50, but you can't do it with 15. You just can't. For 15, you got to sing around the campfire. You got to sing Christmas songs that are so familiar to people that it's like Christmas carols, like a sing-along that you might have when people got together in the living room and started singing. And if you don't do that, if you pick hymns that are too hard or too formal or are too high, or your pianist is faltering, then the music is kind of an embarrassment and kind of uncomfortable and never really works. However, we've discovered that the temptation for these small groups to try and do more complicated music seems to be overwhelming. So we gave them a list, and if you want this list, I can send it to you if you email me. Send around a paper or something. We have a list of the hymns out of the hymn book that we think are the most likely ones that a very small group can sing. Yeah.
So you're distributing to the satellites what music they should sing?
No, that's picked locally.
Oh,
because the kind of music that we can do in Albuquerque with 250 people in the congregation is completely different from anything that they should be trying. With professional musicians and so on. So, but we went through the hymn book and we picked out about 30 hymns that we thought were either well enough known or easy enough or catchy enough that they could be done and sung. And if anybody wants that list, we can get it for you.
I want
So
everything.
say what?
I want everything.
You want everything, but you've
Yeah.
got a small group. What the small group has is the personal relationships in small groups. And that's the important thing. What we can't do at the Albuquerque congregation is let people get up and give them candles and let them talk. There's 250 of them there. We just can't do it. We can't have a discussion. We don't even try. People can't even hear each other across the room.
Nobody
But-
gets up to the first one, but the first one gets up, everybody.
That's right, exactly. And then all of a sudden, there's nothing left, no time left for worship service. So, but in a group this size, which our branches are not a lot bigger than this, they're 20 people at the most. These are very small towns. They can share rather profound things with each other and as a part of the sermon discussion. A richness that we can't touch. But music, can't do it. So that's capitalized on what you have, which is the spirituality of interaction and the spirituality of deep conversation.
Sorry, excuse me, one question before. So you have never, because of licensing issues, recorded the entire service and broadcast it elsewhere?
There are no licensing issues. We could, with the licenses that we have for music and projection, we could do a whole service and video capture it and send it to our congregations, which isn't really a broadcast, it's a very narrow cast, but they're a part of the congregation. So anything you can do in your own sanctuary, you can record and do in your sanctuary somewhere else. But it makes for bad worship.
Sure.
To sit for an entire hour, watch a screen, watch other people sing, listen to other people read. Yeah. So that's why we wanted that locally produced flavor.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. All right.
So what kind of licenses do you have?
You would have to ask bands that.
Okay.
But there's some kind of license that allows you to use. I mean, almost all classical music you can use if you buy the music.
Correct.
And almost all, folk music is in the public domain already, but this kind of, I can change the world with my own two hands, that kind of music, you buy a license for several $100s a year, and then you're allowed to project the words.
Thank you so much.
The branches all have hymnals, by the way, so they have the resources. We really bought them for the readings, but they insist on trying to use the hymn. Okay, so didn't finish this one. So there's the issue of what changed for us when we did this. So one thing that most all of the effects on the larger church, the congregation as a whole, especially the non-staff part of the congregation, have been 100% beneficial. The Albuquerque congregation loves the fact that it started this innovative program. It loves the fact that it has a presence in these faraway places. People go visit sometimes when they're in Socorro to see the bird sanctuary. They stay long enough to worship with the Socorro congregation on their way home. They've got a cottage in the mountains. They go to Edgewood, stuff like that. And they really love that. So that it's been good for the congregation. It's kind of a techie bunch, and they like the idea. They capitalized on that. So it offers a layer of complexity for the staff that is a little breathtaking. So we started making lists of how exactly you get things to all the people who need them every Sunday, like the reading to the branch worship leaders and so on, and how we exactly schedule everybody and know who's doing what, and our bookkeeper we had to change our bank account to a statewide bank so that there would be bank branches in the towns where we had, so there were some complexities, and there was an initial technology cost. We had a grant from the UUA to cover those initial startup costs, but since then it's been self-sustaining and financially self-sustaining. So the biggest interesting thing about how to be a multi-site church then, the one that's caused us the biggest conundrums, is how you do it politically. how do you do a congregational meeting when when a big chunk of your people are 350 miles away? How do you have a truly representative board that meets once a month, sometimes more? You would like to have a branch person on your board. So luckily for us, one of our branches is really within commuting distance, and so we have often had a branch person on our board. And we've learned how to use telephone connections and Skype connections and so on to deal the branch folks into the church meetings. But sometimes we get going as if we're all in Albuquerque, and we have to stop ourselves from that.
Do they pledge, the branch members pledge significantly less than the main church?
They do, but they pledge in, so one of the things that happens as churches get bigger, pledges get bigger. It's just one of the facts of life, because there's no economy of scale, because in the church business, expectations go up as fast as membership goes up, so it's actually more expensive per person to run a church like this than a 75-member fellowship. But presumably people get more out of it. The branches, on the other hand, that what they get out of it is basically the small church size, and that's what their pledges are, small church size.
Thank you.
But their direct costs to us are pretty minimal. I think each of the branches has a budget of under $5,000, and amongst the 20 or so people, they're easily paying $5,000. So they're paying not only for their expenses, but for some of the infrastructure that supports them. Also, a couple of our biggest donors come from branches too. And because they are generous people and because they love this, it's come to mean so much to them. And so I'll just tell you one story from Socorro that warms my heart. This is how we started the groups. We took the people we knew from Socorro, and we said, would you be interested in not always driving up to Albuquerque and having something in Socorro? Oh my gosh, yes, they said it would be, but there's only 5 of us. And we said, well, if we could quadruple that, would you be interested in explaining what we had in mind? Oh yes, totally, they say. So we got those 5 people together. We asked them, do you have friends? So in the end, we had a little starting group of about 10 people. And that group spent quite a lot of time on the logistics, finding a place, making a relationship with the Episcopal priest, thinking about the technology and how they would actually do it. And also they were in a covenant group together, getting to know each other in a deep way. And then it came time for our launch. And for that, we put advertisements in the town newspaper. Now, we've never put an advertisement in the Albuquerque paper. It would break the bank. It's so expensive. But the little town newspapers is $25. So we put a bunch of advertisements in there. Unitarian Universalist congregation starting up. Come check us out. And another 10 people came. So now we have 20. That's our target. Among the 20 people who came was a very elderly lady. She was then in her 80s. She's now in her 90s. And she said, when I was a young woman, I worked for the American Unitarian Association in Boston, and I fell in love with my husband, who came here to teach at the technical school. And so we moved here, and I've lived here, and I raised my children here. I was born and raised a Unitarian. This is the first time I've had a church in 50 years. And she signed up to be in our endowment practically the first week of the congregation years. All those years she had been stuck in Socorro. And in the old days, at the time that she moved to Socorro, the only time people went to Albuquerque was to fly or die. Because it's where the big hospital was that took care of the really complicated, really serious medical issues. And that's where the airport is.
So is Socorro like God's country out there?
Is it God's country?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Really beautiful.
It's really beautiful.
The
In
whole
a cow and sky and desert kind of way.
The whole place is
Or the whole
God's country.
Right, that's right. The whole place is God's country, yeah.
What is a covenant group?
A covenant group? A small group ministry, chalice circles, Do you have them in your church? It's, if you want to start one, there's a book out on, there's 2 books out on the
Small
table
group
you can
ministry,
play,
I'm
right?
familiar.
Okay, so they get together, read something, a little something together about a topic, like money or,
Okay, they bond.
right?
Ah, okay,
It's a
got
deep
it.
sharing kind of
Yeah.
What is that called?
covenant groups. Very, very powerful part of a church's ministry. You should, and they're just as good in small congregations as in big ones. So you should check out that book, which was written for people who don't have lots of church staff infrastructure to organize those kinds of groups. So it's an all step-by-step process. That's it. So the slide that for some reason isn't in there was some of the other things we've done with those videos. So once we started producing the videos so that we could give them to our branches. But then we discovered that there's an elderly housing complex, going all the way from independent living to nursing home, one of those kind of places in Albuquerque, where we knew that we had about 10 families, couples and singles. And not only that, but they all knew who some liberal-minded friends would be. It's hard for them to get out and drive on Sunday. A lot of them don't drive. The bus goes to the big churches, but it can't go to every church. And so they were never coming. So they said, hey, can we have the videos? And their chaplain, the paid chaplain of the place, organized the Unitarians together and whoever else wanted to come. And twice a month, they look at a video and they talk about it. They didn't want to have a worship service. They said they're a bunch of humanists out there, so they said no funny stuff, but we just want the sermons. So fine, we did that. We started sending the intern out with. After the chaplain suggested this and developed it, we now send the intern out as a way to train interns. We envisioned the same possibility for campus ministry. The college students wanted to not have to come to the grown-up church and be dull and boring like grown-ups are, and they wanted to do it themselves. Here's a way they can do it themselves and have some content. And if they wanted to do the rest of their, they keep talking about circle worship and the importance of circle worship for young people, and so fine, do the rest of it as a circle worship. Have a ball. We've used them also for we've offered them to the very small congregations in our district, but a few other congregations got wind of it from other parts of the congregations, other parts of the area. So once you're doing this, it doesn't matter where you send them. We could send them to Alaska. We put 4 together from the season before that are kind of not very time sensitive. We just put them on 4 DVDs and put them in the mail along with the scripts and the suggestions for hymns and readings and stuff, and send them off. $100 a year covers all of our costs, and small congregations that don't have resources or for whom getting into them in mountain communities or isolated communities hard at certain times of year, they have resources to use. We stopped doing that, but we did it for a while. And we thought maybe if we stopped, somebody else would start doing it, and that might be useful. But the small congregations that used it said it took a huge burden off the program committee folks who, so 4 times a year they have something in the bag already. And what we try and do is put those kind of UU 101 sermons in that you can't get from your local college professors and other speakers in a small community.
Question.
Yes.
How does your model differ from the one employed in Houston?
In Houston, first of all, in Houston, we started we had all our babies by our own pregnancy, right?
Okay.
And we started them from scratch. In Houston, they adopted. As a matter of fact, they adopted troubled teenagers. Which is that's a very risky thing to do. So we're all waiting to see what happens. But so those were existing fellowships that had just gotten too tired or were not thriving and felt like they just needed to merge with First Church in Houston. They brought in quite a, and they were not tiny groups either. I think they brought in like 3 groups of about 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings in enough money that you can hire, they hired a full-time minister to be that campus pastor.
Okay, that's one. 2, how does this differ than, say, the way a cathedral would work with satellite congregations from Catholicism or Episcopalianism?
It's a different religion.
Yeah,
Right. Well, you know, and it's
same
also, so
branch.
the Catholics and the Episcopalians have the communion problem, the blessed Eucharist problem.
Okay.
So that you can bless the Eucharist in your own congregation and pack it up and take it somewhere else.
Yeah.
But you cannot, as a matter of fact, have a fully lay-led Episcopal congregation, because it takes the priest to bless the bread and the wine so that everybody can take communion, and that's important to them.
Okay. So here's my trinity of questions.
Okay.
Can you see this model working with having another UU minister at a satellite site or?
Yes, well, so that's what they're doing in Houston, and that's also now in San Diego. They did something a little bit different. They started one branch in a booming suburb of mostly Latino families.
Temecula? Where is it?
No, it doesn't sound like Temecula. It can't,
Was in the
something
Bay Area.
city,
Okay.
down near the border. And a booming suburban place, one of those places where you can actually buy a house for under $200,000 in the area, but it's
Mhm.
highly Spanish speaking. And their goal was to start a 200-member branch down there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they succeeded in starting a 100-member branch down there. But they have their own music and worship staff that goes down there. So instead of having lay people produce the local worship, they have ministers producing the local worship. But the sermon still comes from
From the
First.
main. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, is it Christopher?
Chris, yes. I also have a trinity of questions.
Okay.
First, a clarification. So the timing when the branch services take place, on the one hand, since they're renting the space, is there not even an option to do a morning service? They have to do the afternoon?
Okay, so we actually have basically now in practice 3 different things going on. The Socorro congregation worships in the afternoon, and they're the ones who do it like we had envisioned, which is we upload it and they download it, and they use the sermon from the same day, and that's what we were thinking it would be like. The Edgewood congregation ended up in a space they really liked, in which they could have morning time. And they therefore, somebody who works in Albuquerque drops by the church office every Thursday, picks up a DVD made from last week's sermon, and they just live with it. If last week was Easter and they're hearing it a week late, they say they don't care. It's not what I had in mind, but it works for them. The Carlsbad congregation, the one that's so far away that we don't get to see them very often, and they never get to see us live, is they do a combination of their own programming, and they use the videos, and they just pick and choose on the website what they think they're going to like, which is also what the nursing home group does. And that wasn't our idea either, but when your teenagers have moved out of reach, what can you do? It's working for them, so that's what they're doing.
Another curious, if within the branches, any activity or urgings around religious education for children and youth, and ways of bringing that, extending that, or where the main campus is some sort of a hub in a similar respect?
Our original vision was that each group would offer religious education for children, or would be welcoming to families with children on this model, that the kids would be in the service every week from the beginning through the beginning of the sermon. and that there would always be something especially for the children done. It's one of the things we train the labor leaders to do is to do a good job of talking to children. And then somebody would go with them for a playtime on the playground for the 20 minutes of the sermon, and then they would come back at the end of the discussion for the refreshments. This worked for a while in Socorro. And then they had a terrible tragedy, which was a young mother, the mother of 3 of the children, died. And then those 3 children were moved out of state to be with their grandparents. And that ended the program. There had been 6 or 7 kids there every week, but when 3 left and the pain associated with those 3. And for us, it was a lesson in, we had so hoped that we could save these small groups from the ails that ail small groups, one of which is that this kind of attrition can be fatal. You lose 2 families, you've lost your whole program. You lose, a lay leader gets transferred, suddenly, you're just reeling. We can't save the groups from many, it turns out, of the things that bother small groups and make them chancy. The only thing we can really save them from is having to do their own accounting and their own Sunday programming. So the Edgewood group has 4 or 5 children who come pretty frequently, and they are given materials to color and so on during the service. So they've got one ear on the video and one on they're a little bit, this set of kids is a little bit older and able to get something out of a sermon, and that seems to work for them. Because the playground at the Unity Church is really a cool playground, and they like to come.
Can you envision sending RE, like streaming RE to a site with other children? I mean, with a pad, I used to be a school teacher. I used to interact with children in other schools sometimes. I mean, is this something that...
No, I'm going to have to find myself a techie teacher and find that out. What an interesting idea. I'm going to remember that, Gordon. Thank you. No, I hadn't thought of that. What we have been able to do is invite the teenagers to come to the programming for teenagers, to come in for OWL. I mean, a couple of Edgewood families, it's only 30 miles away, but they want sex education for their kids, which they're totally not getting in rural schools. And Socorro has sent a couple of kids. Also to our summer camp. So the kids have some bonding with their peers. And once you get into teenagers, it's really hard to have a small church.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answered your question. I'm afraid it's a little grim, but that's what we discovered.
And thinking about this district, Metro New York in particular, and relatively speaking, it's increased in density of population and geography, where, not in every case, but in many cases, how far someone would have to go to get to another UU congregation is considerably less than the stretches of the Southwest. So, whether it's happened anywhere or even what possibility there might be of existing UU churches in New Jersey, like Summit and Somerset Hills, which aren't too far, but meeting somewhere in the middle with some kind of a shared, birthing, or if you foresee that one has got to be one established mother and not so ambiguous.
Right. There's a whole other model which was used through the last century of you get Summit and where?
Somerset Hills,
New Jersey. Kind of two towns which are too far away for people to commute, but in the middle there's another little town, and the two go together to put both some of their members, the members who live to the south and the members who live to the north, and you say, look, if we put together our southerners and your northerners, we got 40 people. That's enough. Let's together work on the capital costs of this. That's still viable, but that starts a whole new congregation. And in my opinion, it's silly to start a whole new congregation in a place where you don't think they will ever have 150 members. Which is to say, because Because I mean, for all that those very small congregations meet the needs of the last generation, they are not meeting the needs of the new century. And so if people are coming for spiritual growth, they need some kind of professional leadership, is my belief. Which doesn't, I'm not dissing fellowships at all, because they obviously serve an important need, but they're serving an important need for the 60 and up set, for the current 60 and up set. The next 60 and up set, they're going to need something else. So this is looking towards that future. I hope I'm not upsetting you too much. Is it Leah? Did you have?
Sorry, no, we were just saying, well, was that in New Jersey our problem is almost the flip, which is we have too many congregations. So we are 4 congregations within 15 miles.
Okay, you
And
don't need any branches there.
Within another 30 miles we have Somerset Hills, so then that's 5 congregations. And it's almost like, Vanessa, my minister, and I've talked a lot about why we would do this, and really the reason we would do it was for anybody who's in a retirement community,
Mm-hmm.
who's a shut-in, who's unable to come to us,
Right.
and especially because of the weather. There are many times when they can't get to us.
Right.
And the other is campus ministry. Those are the only 2 places then that we would have.
So, well, and I can see another possibility. If you're really that dense, I'm trying to decide whether it's worth digging out my maps, and even the ones I have are old. But I have some maps in which are painted different colors depending on the number of UUs per capita in the county. And I looked at it. It's also 2000 data, not even 2010. So it's out of date. But I did look at the map for this metro area, and you guys are pretty saturated. You're pink. It goes from white to black and through the red spectrum, and you guys are pink. And it only gets 2 better than that. So, you're doing a pretty good job around here already of attracting about as many UUs as it seems possible to attract. But there is this issue about style differences, and this is another way to handle style differences. So if you're in a group and you have a gorgeous little chapel with the perfect, wonderful organ, and people come because it's so traditional and so organ-like and so, do you really want a band in there? Maybe not. So if you're going to try and do an outreach to the generation that grew up on bands in worship, you may have to do it someplace else. But if you instead of starting something afresh, somebody was talking about something around here that's starting afresh, clearly a young adult-centered ministry in this district.
It's an Original Blessing.
Original Blessing.
Brooklyn, New York.
Right. So you can go that way with the entrepreneurial ministers, but it's being a tough row to hoe for them, and at least I think the Washington one has flopped now, and the Chicago one flopped. So we're still experimenting with how to start these young adult-centered ministries on their own. The one in Oakland is still going, and now there's one here. So I don't think this is a done deal. I think we're just learning how to do it. But another way to say, look, we really want young adults in our congregation is to share your building. And in the fellowship hall of that gorgeous church with the organ upstairs in fellowship hall, you have the Sunday afternoon thing or the Sunday evening thing that is more contemporary music and more band driven. I guess that's what they're doing here with this Friday evening thing. And you get people who would never come on Sunday. And for a while we had a Sunday afternoon contemporary service, and it was very interesting that the congregation never got big enough for that group for us to really go with it. So as soon as we got the bigger room, we quit. We folded the contemporary music into the regular service, which took some political capital on the part of the 25-year minister, let me tell you. So can't be done every place. But that's what we did. The contemporary service that we had, which we assumed would appeal to the young people, right? So the first thing that happens is I go to our young adult group and I say, guys, I got this cool idea. How about if we, in the afternoon, with a band, and your kind of music, and what do you think? And they kind of looked at me and said, we like hiking in the afternoon. Hiking. There, I guess I was sort of aware of this, but I had glossed over its possible importance. They would come to the second service, hang out a while, collect a few people who didn't come to the service at all, go out to lunch together, and then go take a hike. And that's their religious experience. Totally fine, totally wonderful, but my afternoon service was not appealing to them because it was going to interfere with life. And they also said something interesting to me, which was, you know, Christine, you don't have to bribe us with music. We like, this is okay. This is okay the way it is. We had a mix. This is okay the way it is, and anyway, we come for the ideas, and that's what we want. So it took me a while. I kept having to ask questions, but eventually I got what she said, which was that they believe that the evangelical churches are trying to bribe people with exciting music to come and also listen to the message, and they didn't want any part of that.
It's quite an analysis.
Right. And that wasn't at all what we were really trying to do either. It's not bribing people to hear a disgusting message by giving them 10 minutes of their music. We had a much more holistic vision than that. But anyhow, but the lesson in that is the people who are already coming to your traditional worship service like it that way. That's why they're coming. So you really do have to start completely afresh. The people who came to the contemporary service were people who worked on either Saturday night or Sunday morning. And that turned out to be a lot of people. We had no idea how many people consider themselves a part of our congregation, but who could not regularly work with us, worship, because Sunday morning is no longer a universal day off, especially for young people who have to work retail jobs and hotel jobs and entertainment jobs. That's all weekend work. Another group of people who came were people who could not take the crowding in our crowded sanctuary. They were somewhat fragile of mental health. As a matter of fact, 3 of them brought animals with them, comfort animals with them. And 2 of them untrained comfort animals, which we couldn't cope with on Sunday morning. Great big sheepdogs that can't sit still, So room was not much bigger than this for 250 people. We just couldn't handle it, and neither could they. And so they were coming also. And much more diverse. A lot of younger, people of color, people who didn't speak English as their first language. They all spoke English. We weren't trying to do a Spanish service. But, you just look around with your eyes, even in New Mexico, where a lot of the diversity is kind of hidden, and say, whoa, this is different. This is new. Well, this is what we had in mind. This is cool. And that's when I realized, and it's also young. So.
Nice Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, at 1 o'clock. Early Sunday afternoon.
So your trained worship leaders are trained to make sure that the content of the sermon fits in well with their readings and the poetry and so on.
Right. Well, they don't choose the readings, they just do the readings. The readings are chosen by the minister who's preparing the sermon, and those are emailed to them.
Okay.
So
the hymns and so on, they're sort of making sure that it's a cohesive service, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you as the minister make sure that the lives of your branch people are reflected in your sermons?
That's harder. Another question that didn't get asked is easier, which is about pastoral care, which is interesting. So now that communication is easier and transportation is easier, people don't just come to Albuquerque to die. They come from a lot of major medical care. So that most of the things that would land a person in the hospital long enough that I would ever visit them anyway, they land the branch people in the hospital long enough that they can be visited. They land the branch people in the hospital in Albuquerque. So major heart attack, big cancer diagnosis, they all come up to where the technology is. So we can do some pastoral care that way, and the other is done by email and telephone, and frankly, in the large church with a relatively small staff, that's how everybody gets pastoral care, is on the phone. Almost, I never visit people in their homes, I can't, too much. I just don't have time, so. Doesn't matter whether you're in El Paso,